vote today. Voters overwhelmingly turned down a ballot proposal to pay for better roads and infrastructure in our state.
6 months later, state lawmakers came up with a plan to pump more than $1 billion into the roads. Now, as the deadline for that cash to materialize is getting closer, 24-hour News 8 political reporter Rick Albin looks at the prospects for better roads in Michigan.
It's springtime in Michigan, and the flowers and the construction barrels are in full bloom. The road construction season will bring hundreds of repair or building projects, big and small, and when it's all done, there will be hundreds more projects that still need to be done. More of those may be addressed beginning in the 2019-20 budget. Some of the $1.2 billion in additional funding promised by the legislature will be available largely for roads and bridges. But where is that money coming from, and will it really be there? The money is supposed to come from here, at least partially. Roughly $400 million generated from the gas tax going up 7.3%. Another $200 million will be generated from increased registration fees. Those dollars have already started to flow. The rest will come from here. Another $600 million out of a $54 billion budget. Piece of cake, right? Maybe, maybe not. How confident are you that that $600 million is going to be there when it comes time to pay up?
Not very.
That is the less than optimistic view of Grand Rapids State Representative David LeGrand. But he's far from the only person to wonder if the cash will be there when it's time for the rubber to meet the road. The money actually comes from a much smaller pot. It's called the General Fund, General Purpose, and will rely on the discipline of future legislators to make the promise real. This year, that part of the budget is about $10 billion, but that money pays for a lot of what we know as government. Fully 44% goes to health and human services. Spending on corrections, higher ed, and MSP makes up another 37%. After debt service and a small amount to the school aid fund, there's about 12% or $1.2 billion left in the fund. By 2021, $600 million of that is supposed to go to roads. Are you convinced we get there?
I think we can, but one of the things that I think I'd like to see us do, even maybe starting this year, is let's take a look at some of the money that we're saving in this year's budget. We know we've got some one-time funds. We could actually use that and pre-fund or start to pre-fund some of that road work. Maybe in other words,
Michigan's budget director and former chairman of the House Appropriations Committee says that careful budgeting will be needed to fulfill a promise that he and his colleagues made when he was still in the House in 2015. Pasholka's replacement as chair of Appropriations, Representative Laura Cox, is aware of promises made.
So any good appropriator looks out, outward, and we may look sometimes up to 5 years ahead. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at.
Something else the legislature and appropriators may be looking at long-term is tax reduction. That's something Cox says she would like, and her colleagues made it their first priority when they tried and failed to pass what would have been a $1 billion cut to the general fund by rolling back state income taxes. While one insider I spoke with in Lansing says they believe, quote, the train has left the station on that issue, others seem intent on doing something to reduce taxes, and that will all figure into the equation on roads. Are you convinced that that $600 million is going to be there when the time comes?
Yeah, it should be. That's the whole point of what we did.
Governor Snyder and, in fact, most of the lawmakers and others I spoke to think the money will be fully in place by 2021, and some are making plans either way.
We're building our 5-year plan as if that money's there, because if it's not there, then we start taking out projects. I mean, if it's just that simple. That's half of what the increase was all about. And if it's not there, it will have an impact, and there will be projects that would just line itemed out.
If that cash, or most of it, is delivered to the MDOT, counties, and others to work on roads, it'll still be far from enough, according to a new infrastructure study done for the state. The question of more money for roads and bridges and sewers and water systems, even Wi-Fi, that's all likely to come up in the years to come.
Well, certainly there'll be talk about more spending, that's for sure. But what about that tax relief that lawmakers were talking about?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question, because if you take $1 billion out of the general fund and in a few years have to come up with $600 million, you've put a $1.6 billion drain on a $10 billion pile of money. That's a whole lot of stress. I don't think that the income tax part of it may come back, but if there is extra money when they get done with this budgeting process this year, you heard what the budget director wants. He'd like for him to save it for roads, but it might be some form of tax relief back to the citizens if legislators have their way.
Okay. We'll watch it. Thank you, Rick.